Hey everybody, welcome to the basic art journal page class with this gorgeous abstract collage style page. We are going to use some fun ephemera that will be listed in the supply list. I'm also going to be using some dies to create different kinds of ephemera that you might want to use on a journal page or that you can put onto a card. I love this little sort of specimen style envelope die. This is great for having other types of ephemera like the little stamps that you'll see come out of. It's a really beautiful little envelope, and if you're a fan of Nick Bantock at all, you will know why I love this particular type of creative ephemera. So this little window die goes with it. You can cut a window in the front so that you can have either a specimen envelope, which I actually have a video on my YouTube channel, or you can create an ephemera pocket like I'm going to do with just a little bit of Duralar. So this you can sort of see through the little window, which I like, and I'm going to add just a separate piece of tape to cover up that sticky. I had left a little bit of tape sticking out, so I can just cover that up with another piece of tape. So this one goes together really easily. It has some scored flaps that you will just adhere closed, and then I like to burnish all double-sided tape. But you can see what I mean about slipping those stamps in there. Isn't that sweet and sort of Victorian looking? So I have these little floral stamps that will go in there. It's so cute. And at first I considered putting them on this page, but I'm actually not going to do that. So the way that I start every page is with some sort of color basis. So in this case, I have some fountain pen ink, I have some clear gesso, and I have some paint. And the reason that I like to mix a color with my clear gesso is it gives me a variegated look. It's not smooth, it's not perfect. It makes for a really interesting background if you mix your color with the wet clear gesso. Now you could use white gesso as well. I just happen to be using clear. Typically when I make this decision, it's whatever's in front on my shelf, but you'll see in a second what this does to the paint. So this is a fluid acrylic that I've just dropped onto the wet gesso, and as I work on it with my silicone spatula, it creates in some places kind of a little resist, and it makes the color transparent, so it has a brightness to it that I really like. And for me, this is just an interesting way to break a blank journal page and get background that has some texture and some interest in it. So the little streaks, I think, add to it. A lot of times when you're painting, you're looking to get rid of that look, but on an art journal page, it really adds quite a bit. So this is actually two different colors of fluid acrylic that I've mixed here. Now I have a little sleeve that I separate the pages of my journal with while I'm working, so I will put those on the supply list as well. So now I'm using matte medium to coat a section of the page that I'm going to put some pattern paper on. This is usually step one in a collage style journal page for me. You can always get quite a bit of interest just by simply collaging paper onto your surface. This happens to have a lot of color in it, which I really like. And I'm going to add a little bits of ephemera for focal points in and around the main piece of paper. The paper that you use can be a book page, it can be a magazine page, it can be anything that just adds interest to your background. And you can start to build up these other little focal points around that. Now, one thing that I really like to do on an art journal page is add texture. The easiest way to do this is with a stencil and some embossing paste, which I'm doing here. And I like to separate the textured portions. So you can see I did a little bit on the right a little bit on the left. That is a technique that I use almost every time I sit down to make a journal page. So once that's dry, I'll add some stamping. This is another thing that I always do, and I usually just do it with my hands, not even with an acrylic block. I like it to be sort of intentionally distressed. And here I'm using archival ink. So this is a waterproof ink. The reason that I use matte medium instead of a gloss medium is that stamping on top of matte medium is very easy, and you'll get lots of detail, like you can see with that little signature stamp that I have there. Now, I like to contrast between lighter and darker ink colors. So I have one that is black, and then I have some that are just dark brown and sort of blend into the background a little bit more. So one of the techniques that I do all the time is this sort of back and forth between lighter and darker colors, and also complementary colors, which we'll talk about in a little bit. So here I'm going to add some of that fountain pen ink that I talked to you about earlier. I'm actually going to use this 2 different ways. Whenever I add embossing paste, I add a medium on top of that, whether that's a liquid watercolor, an acrylic ink, or in this case, a fountain pen ink that ends up being waterproof at the end in case you want to do another technique on top of it. And what that does is it just brings out that embossing paste texture. So I do this 100% of the time when I use embossing paste, and here I'm going to layer a blue on top of this as well. So I have a little bit of brown to make it darker, and then I have a turquoise blue or phthalo blue green shade ink to spread around and add the complementary color that we talked about. So the background is a very warm yellowish brown, and then I will always add a complementary, so in this case a turquoise, to just have that back and forth play that I think is so important in an art journal page. So now I am just using a very rough, cheap brush to spread a little bit of that ink around the page. And I'm also going to splatter some Dina Wakley acrylic sprays in white all over this page. White splatters and black splatters are something I do almost every time I sit down to make a page. These are what I consider unifying elements. So while you may have a lot going on across your page in terms of texture and pattern, splatters will unify the entire page and make it a seamless composition. Another thing I like to do is splats. So here I have just a dropper, and I'm dropping some of the fountain pen ink. It retains a fun shape from being dropped, that it's sort of like coffee spilled on a page, and it gives you a little bit of contrast in terms of the darkness. Now I will add some gold highlights. I think that shimmer is something that when you pick up your art journal and you have a subtle shimmery element, it adds to your enjoyment of that page when you're looking at it later on. It's not a very strong visual element. It's really meant to be enjoyed up close, not necessarily in a photograph. And you'll see when I show you the close-up exactly how much it adds. Now, in addition to the white splatters, I will use white and black paint pens on almost all of my pages to make certain areas really pop and draw your eye. So for example, this little luggage tag, I wanted to draw your eye there, so I put a larger white dot there. It sort of moves the viewer around the page. The viewer that I'm intending here is me, and so I'm attracting my eye to different spaces on the page using light colors. So your eye is always drawn to light, and if there are things you want to focus on, this is a great way to do it. Now, in addition to the splatters, I'm also creating larger dots of the turquoise ink spray. This adds to the complementary nature of the color scheme with the yellow in the background and the blue in the foreground. Using the rule of threes here for those, and in this close-up, you're able to see the gold paint. It looks sort of transparent. from a distance, but up close as I turn the page, you can see how very much that adds to a journal page. And when you go back and enjoy your journal pages later on, you're going to want these little touches to kind of keep your attention on the page over a longer period of time. I just enjoy this so much. There's a lot to look at here, even though it was a very simple process. So just to review, these are some elements I use on every page: complementary colors, physical texture with pastes, with chunky paints, etc. Subtle background patterns. I like pattern paper for this. The rule of 3, you'll see me kind of move around the page with the white paint, with the turquoise drops, that kind of thing. The reason we're drawn to the rule of 3, if you think about how a human face or a mammalian face looks, 2 eyes and a mouth, that's why we're drawn to that pattern. Dark and light contrast. I like black and white, obviously, but also like the brown ink versus the white splatters. Those are all good dark light contrasts. Unifying elements like all over paint spattering, text, and mark making, which is essentially what I was doing with the white paint pen and the turquoise paint at the end. So here is another look at the page, and I'll point out some of these 3D texture from the pastes. Complementary colors, the turquoise on the yellow. Think about this before you sit down. Dark light contrast, so I added a little sentiment strip with black and white. That's really important. Text, always include that on a page. Pattern from paper. This can be anything you choose. And then you have a balanced, enjoyable journal page that you can enjoy for years and years to come. Thanks so much for taking this basics class. I do have other classes in my classroom, and I will have a series on speed journaling and getting you started in art journaling quickly and easily and without intimidation. Thanks so much for watching.